My first name is Musa, surname is Mbhokota, and most people call me Midnight because that's my call sign. And now I am here as part of SAAB, part of the Gripen campaign, but I fly the Gripen in South Africa, and I've been flying the Gripen in South Africa for the past 11 years, so to speak.
So Musa, what can you tell us about your background in military flying?
I have been flying now, this is my 25th year of military flying in the South African Air Force. I did my flying training as an instructor in the Swedish Air Force. I'm also a qualified experimental test pilot, so I do flight testing as well, which I've done on many different types, including the Gripen. And I'm a Gripen pilot. I have a total of 3,300 hours, flying hours on military types. I've got 1,300 hours on the Gripen system. And I also flew the Cheetah, which is very similar to the Kafir, which you fly here. And I flew that aircraft for 5 years. So I can relate from where you are and where, hopefully, if you buy the Gripen, where you're going to be.
So the Cheetah performance is very, very similar to the Kafir one.
Yes.
A little bit of difference. And now that you are flying the Gripen, what can you tell us about the difference from passing from one platform to another one?
I think if you are a Kafir pilot or a Cheetah pilot, you are very proud because those aircraft are very difficult to fly and they require a lot of skill. But if you're talking about a war machine and going to war with an aeroplane, I would leave them at home. I'll go for something like the Gripen. The gap between a Kafir and a Gripen is in an order of magnitude difference. It's like a generational change. So if I can explain it this way, you're talking, I can give you an example of mobile phones. Back in the day when you used to use a old Nokia phone, like a Nokia 210, and then you go from a Nokia 210 to an iPhone 8. That's how big the difference is. But if I ask you, and you've only been using a Nokia phone, Nokia 210, how good is your phone? You say it's very good because you've been calling with it. But if I tell you, if you have this new phone, you can make telephone calls, you can send WhatsApps, you can send photographs, you can talk on Skype, you can send emails, you can do multiple things. So to illustrate the gap is that big. So to give you an example, if you think as part of a threat, Kafir against a Sukhoi 30, I think 4 Kafirs against a Sukhoi 30, you're going to have a problem. A Gripen against a Sukhoi 30, no problem. One-on-one. So if you put 2 Gripens against 2 Sukhoi 30s, no problem. Because of the capabilities the Gripen bring, not only in terms of the data link, your situational awareness, and the way you can employ the aircraft in a way that you are incognito, so to speak. So the gap, as to summarize, in my opinion, is an order of magnitude. But the only way you see the gap is when you make the step. It's difficult to quantify the gap if you have not made the step.
And from the point of view of performance, the physical performance, putting aside the electronics in the game, but I think that it is also the same thing.
The performance, let me give you an example, a simple example. If you take a Kafir and you put bombs on it, and you try to do a loop, and try to maneuver with an airplane, can you do it? I think you will need a small prayer before you do that. In a Gripen, you can do that. You can do full aerobatics in full configuration, no problem. So that's the power difference between the 2 types of airplane. If you're talking about a system, systems-wise, I don't even think there's a comparison because the situational awareness in a Gripen is so good that in good, bad weather conditions, you can take that aircraft in cloudy conditions and do full aerobatics if you want. And you always know where you are and you have got good control of the airplane. The second most important thing, which is, in my opinion, underestimated, is that the flying of the airplane becomes secondary in a Gripen because the aircraft is easy to fly. The performance of the aircraft has got what we call carefree handling, and you've got what we call maneuver load limit. So it's not possible to depart the airplane or not possible to not deliberately overstress the aeroplane. So If you think from that point of view, as a cafe pilot, most of the time the pilot is managing the flying of the aircraft, which means that he doesn't have much capacity to focus on the system. If you're not focusing on the system, you must remember, in modern warfare, the war is not inside your cockpit, it's outside. The enemy you're fighting, you can't see with the naked eye. So in other words, your system utilization becomes very, very key. And secondly, your ability to collaborate with other platforms through the use of a tactical data link, sharing information, fuel information, weapon information, sharing video information. To give you a simple example, you can take a picture with your recce pod and then take that picture and send it via the data link to your partners in real time. The same way you can send a WhatsApp chat, we can send text via data link. I can type in and send you a text. And that way, you know what I'm thinking. The same way, in your iPhone, you can send a position. I can take a position and say I'm interested in that point. That's the point of interest for us, without communicating. We can do that in real time.
Without the enemy knowing it?
No, they don't know. Nobody knows, but you and I know. So, if you look from that picture, you have to appreciate the capabilities this aircraft bring. Secondly, in my opinion, for Colombia, this aircraft will be great because you have to think of the context that the aircraft was designed. It's designed to operate in a tactical way in short airfields, short runways, sometimes on roads, and also to be able to move with very small logistic footprint. So you can do many, many things with this aircraft which you can't do with an F-16, for instance, because you need longer runways. You can't do with a CAFIR, for instance, because you need longer runways. You need a lot more support structure. This gives your government and your commanders the ability to make quick decisions and be unpredictable. And I think that's really fantastic if you want autonomy. In Sweden, the security situation was to operate in a dispersed environment in not as prepared airstrips. So from a South African context, when we used to fly the Cheetah, there were only certain runways you can land the aeroplane. You need a drag chute, you need someone to pick up the drag chute. There are many restrictions. The runway length, you need long enough runways, and you need sometimes barrier nets, you need a lot of things. We bought the Gripen, you can fly virtually anywhere. Virtually anywhere. You can land in most places where you can land a Gripen, you can land a small airplane. So that gives the government and gives the Air Force quite a lot of versatility, in my opinion.
So how has been the introduction of the Gripen to the South African Air Force? How was the process? How long ago are you bringing it? And how was it in general?
I'll give you an example. When we bought the airplanes, we started in 2008. We received them. I was one of the first 6 pilots to be trained by Saab on the Gripen system. Some people in the public were skeptical because they were used to operating French equipment, Mirage types. We had a long history of that type of equipment. But when we started to operate the aircraft, we realized a lot of the things we were worried about, they were actually not a problem at all. And I'm not exaggerating when I mean not at all. So we used to think, for instance, people used to think, but this aircraft doesn't have as much fuel as we would like. We like an aircraft that can carry a lot more fuel. But what people don't understand about fuel is that it's how efficient you use that fuel. The Gripen is very efficient on utilization of fuel because we trim the drag. We reduce the drag through the flight control system. Secondly, the aircraft is so slick that you don't need to be in full afterburner all the time to get the performance you want. That's one simple example. So if you look, during the FIFA World Cup, we covered the FIFA World Cup with about 10 to 12 Gripens. We covered the entire country, all the games. We had 90% availability. We can fly bad weather, day and night conditions. We covered the entire FIFA World Cup with just those aircraft. On average, we were using about 6 aircraft. And that's how good the system is. So if you look, those things, there's no way I can promise you today that you can do that with a CAFE or any other generation aircraft, because the logistics behind it is just too much.
So basically the Gripen is a good, the best option for a small that kind of logistics, or that has not that much money to spend?
You have to think like this. If you speak to a young pilot in your country and you ask them what airplane do they want to fly, they want the biggest, maybe twin engine aircraft that is impressive, that maybe makes them look cool, and so on. If you ask me, after so many years of flying, I was also a squadron commander, you realize it's no point you buy an aircraft you cannot afford to operate, because then you do nothing. Secondly, it's no point you buy an aircraft that is too cumbersome to achieve the requirements that you are looking for. So, in my opinion, you need a cost-effective system, an aircraft that you can keep in the air for as many hours as you want, the aircraft that can achieve your missions in the best and most efficient way. And I believe that the Gripen is well suited for those type of missions. So as it proves nowadays, the cost per flight hour is a big driver on military budgets. And I think the Gripen is very well positioned in that manner. I think something I'd like to add, I've been interacting with some of your colleagues in the Colombian Air Force. You have a very capable Air Force, and you have a unique country that requires many applications for this type of aircraft. My opinion is that this aircraft will give you not only the ability to deal with your external threats, it gives you the ability to also deal with scenarios internally. Let me give you an example. In South Africa, for instance, we have people who do poaching, they kill rhinos, and it's not a good thing. We support those type of missions because we've got the sensors to see where everybody is. And we use the special forces, we use the police, and the people get arrested. So it's a mission that we didn't buy the airplane for, but we're using it for. Another mission, like for instance, when there's natural disasters, we have sensors to go quickly out there to do a quick surveillance. We take the information, we provide it to the politicians so they can take decisions. So those kind of things are not easily quantifiable, but they become very important to the society, because it's not every day your country is attacked, but there are events that happens within your country that requires a quick response. And this aircraft is applicable to all those type of scenarios as well. So there are capabilities that you're not thinking about that eventually you will end up using the aircraft because you realize that it has the capability to do so. The Gripen CD can do all that. The Gripen EF or Gripen NG basically takes the step even further. So if you get that platform, in my opinion, you will be superior to virtually anybody in the region, barring Brazil, because Brazil is buying a similar capability. So you will literally, your Air Force will take such a leap that you will be leading not on technology, you'll be leading in know-how, you're leading in a modern way of fighting. And in my opinion, better than even the first world countries. So it's a big step, and it's an important step, because you have to think you're buying this aircraft not for 3 years, you're buying the aircraft for 30 years. Your children will fly this, your grandchildren will fly this airplane. So you have to think, you can't buy an aircraft that's built in 1974. The F-16 was built in 1974. So when you buy an aircraft like that, are you saying you want to operate it for 70 years? So I think these are the things that one has to think about when you are making such a decision, because it matters. It's not a decision for today, it's a 30-year decision.